The wind rolled across the Holloway farm like an omen, rattling the loose boards and slipping through the cracks as if trying to warn her. Mary Lou Holloway stood in the doorway, apron twisted in her fingers, staring out at the empty road where dust rose in nervous spirals. She had lived alone long enough to know when trouble was coming. And this time trouble rode a black horse with a white star on its brow. The dangerous cowboy didn't slow until he reached her gate. Even then, he sat his saddle like a man who trusted nothing, not the land, not the sky, not himself. Broad shoulders, sun-browned skin, a jaw shadowed with regret. Folks in town called him Waylon Black. Mary called him a mistake waiting to happen. He dismounted with the quiet grace of someone who had walked away from more battles than he'd started. As he stepped closer, Mary felt her heartbeat stumble. She whispered the warning before he even reached the porch. "Please don't come inside." It wasn't fear in her voice, it was memory. She had buried a husband last winter, a good man whose boots still sat by the stove like he meant to return. She wasn't ready for another storm wearing a cowboy smile. Waylon didn't listen. He tipped his hat back, revealing eyes that held a mix of danger and something unexpectedly gentle. "Ma'am, I ain't here for trouble," he said. "Just work. Heard you might need a hand." Mary hated that he was right. The fences were leaning, the roof was tired, and her pantry had the desperate echo of a widow scraping through another season. She needed help. She just didn't need his kind. "You can sleep in the shed," she said sharply, "and you keep your distance. My rules stand firm." He nodded once, accepting her boundaries the way a man accepts barbed wire carefully, and with a trace of old wounds. He carried his saddle to the shed, his footsteps steady, his silence louder than any promise. That night, the wind clawed at the shutters. But another sound woke Mary just past midnight, a firm knock at the door. Heart pounding. She lit a lamp and opened the window curtain just enough to see the sheriff's silhouette. "I'm looking for a cowboy," he said. "Dangerous type. Rode in today. Stage was robbed 2 nights back, and a silver locket's missing. Matches the description he rides." Mary's breath thinned. Waylon's horse. The white star. The rumors. The fear of choosing wrong. "He's a hired hand," she whispered. "And he's done nothing wrong here." The sheriff wasn't convinced. His eyes scanned the darkness, searching for Waylon. Mary made a choice, then not out of trust, but out of instinct. She stepped outside, closing the door behind her like a shield. "Whatever he is," she said, voice steady, "he's not your criminal." But as she walked to the shed, she saw Waylon sitting awake in the cold coat around his shoulders, eyes shadowed with truths he hadn't dared speak yet. "You don't owe me your protection," he murmured. "Maybe not," Mary replied. "But you crossed my gate today. That makes you my problem." He looked up at her, and in the dim moonlight, she saw something break open in his expression. Loneliness, guilt, hope. A dangerous mix. The night held its breath, and Mary Lou Holloway wondered if she had just invited more trouble into her life than she could ever hope to survive. Morning. Light crept over the Holloway farm, slow and pale, like it was afraid of what it might find. Mary stepped onto the porch with a kettle in her hand, pretending her night hadn't been spent turning over the sheriff's words until they cut her. Frost clung to the grass, shining sharp as broken glass. Waylon was already awake. He stood by the fence line with a length of wire in his hands, his coat open to the cold, his breath visible in thin streams. He worked with the quiet focus of a man who needed to prove something, maybe to her, maybe to himself. Mary watched him longer than she meant to. "Coffee's ready," she called. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tested the final knot in the wire, tugged it once, then finally turned to her. "Thanks. I'll take it after I check the mare." There was no guilt in his tone, no nervous flicker, and that unsettled her more. Innocent men could still carry dangerous pasts. Dangerous men could still hide innocence under scars. Inside the kitchen, she poured 2 cups, palms shaking slightly. The sheriff's warning echoed again. A silver locket, gone missing. A man with a white-starred horse. Looks a lot like him. The locket mattered, not because of its worth, but because it had belonged to a woman on that robbed Starger woman whose story had spread through the territory like wildfire. A widow traveling alone, attacked and left shaken. Mary felt the woman's fear deep in her bones. When Wayland stepped inside the kitchen, just far enough for warmth, Mary braced herself. "I need to ask you something," she said. He froze. The air between them tightened like a drawn BOWSTRING ... ask. He replied, "Were you anywhere near the Cedar Ridge Road 2 nights ago?" There. The question that split the morning. Wayland's jaw worked slowly, as though chewing on a truth that tasted bitter. "I was close enough to hear the gunshots," he said, "but not close enough to know who fired I kept riding." Mary swallowed. "And the locket?" "I didn't touch it. Didn't even see it." The simplicity of his answer dug under her ribs, but simplicity wasn't proof. Yet something in his eyes, some quiet, wounded honesty pulled her closer. Before she could speak again, footsteps crunched on the road outside. 2 figures approached the neighbors, Harris and Colt, both known for stirring trouble when they smelled it. Mary stiffened. Wayland's hand dropped instinctively to his belt, though he carried no gun. Harris spat a greeting. "Heard you hired yourself a drifter, Mary." "Heard he looks an awful lot like the stage robber." Colt stepped closer, eyes sharp. "Mind if we take a look in his shed?" Mary moved before Wayland could. She stepped down from the porch, spine straight, chin lifted. "My property ain't a public search ground," she said. "You two best remember that." Mary reached for Running Bear's arm, shocked. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "The locket wasn't important," he murmured. "Finding who took it was. And now I know." His gaze drifted toward the horizon, toward the direction Harris and Colt had ridden the night before. The sheriff exhaled sharply. "I'm ridin' to the canyon trail. There's sign of 2 men moving fast. If they're the robbers, I need help." He looked at Wayland. "You coming? Or you got more lies to outrun?" Wayland wiped sweat from his brow, jaw tight. He looked at Mary, then at the sheriff, then down at his torn palms. "I'm tired of outrunning things," he said. "I'll ride." Mary stepped closer, her voice trembling. "You don't owe them this." "Maybe not," he murmured, "but I owe myself the truth." Running Bear offered a nod. "I will guide." And just like that, the 3 men mounted up. Mary's hand hovered near Wayland's stirrup. She wanted to tell him to stay, that the canyon trail devoured men who carried secrets. Instead, she whispered the words that surprised her more than anyone. "Come back, please." Wayland's eyes softened. "I'll try." The sheriff spurred his horse, and the group rode off. Dust swirling around them like ghosts. Mary's heart followed them down the winding road until they disappeared. That night, the wind grew colder. The sky bruised purple, and sometime near midnight, a single gunshot echoed from the direction of the canyon trailer. Sound that cracked the silence and made Mary's knees weaken. She gripped the porch rail, breath trembling. Something had happened, and she didn't know yet whether the men she'd allowed into her life were riding toward justice, or into a grave. The gunshot echoed across the Holloway farm, long after the sound itself died. Mary barely slept, pacing the floorboards until dawn turned the horizon pale and uncertain. With each passing hour, fear pressed tighter against her ribs. She told herself the sheriff's party was capable. That Running Bear knew the land. That Wayland had survived worse, but the prairie had a way of swallowing hope whole. When the sun finally rose, frost coated the fields like white lace. Mary stepped onto the porch, arms wrapped around herself, breath trembling in the cold dot. 3 riders approached from the east, but only 2 sat tall in their saddles. Mary's single quotes as heart dropped, her fingertips went numb. She hurried down the steps, skirts brushing the frozen ground. The sheriff was first to dismount. His jaw clenched tight. Running Bear followed, steady but grim. And behind them, slumped low in his saddle, rode Wayland, black coat torn, sleeve soaked dark with blood. Mary rushed forward. "Wayland," he stopped her with a soft shake of his head. "It ain't bad," he whispered, though his wince betrayed him. "Bullet grazed me. Sheriff pulled me out before the boys circled back." "What boys?" Mary breathed. The sheriff scrubbed a hand over his beard. The real stage robbers, Harris and Colt, weren't just staring trouble. They were the ones behind it. We found their camp in a ravine. They ran, shots fired. We got one. The other ran deeper into the canyon. Running Bear's voice was low, steady. The locket they planted was to turn eyes away from themselves. Mary closed her eyes against a wave of anger and relief tangling inside her. Waylon slid from his horse, stumbling as his feet hit the ground. Mary moved fast, slipping under his arm, steadying him. He looked down at her, tired but sincere. You didn't believe them, even when it looked bad. Mary didn't answer. Instead, she guided him toward the porch. Running Bear followed, quiet as snowfall. Inside, she cleaned the wound. Waylon hissed as she pressed a cloth to the torn flesh. You could have died out there, she whispered.